Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome along to the latest episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show from the Manchester Evening News. My name is George Smith and joining me, of course, is our Chief United writer, Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, you're there in the airport after a quite remarkable night for Manchester United last night. 3-0 up from the first leg of their Europa League semi-final against Athletic Bilbao. I don't think any of us saw this coming. A quite remarkable night that puts one foot, hopefully, in the Europa League final.
Yeah, as I came out the stadium last night, the streets were being cleaned, and it was impossible not to think that United had actually also wiped the floor of Athletic Bilbao. It was just it was an improbable, unexpected result, but given the significance of the game and the result, it's probably the high point of their season. It didn't have an ounce of the emotion of Lyon, of course, for obvious reasons. And when United players went over to their supporters at full time, there was no over celebrating. And what I liked about Ruben Amorim in his press conference last night was that the first thing he said was, we need to remember what happened in the first 20 minutes tonight. And think about the second leg, because he doesn't want to see it as job done. I don't think these players remotely see it as job done either, where there is a glimmer of, not a glimmer of hope, I wouldn't say, for Athletic Bilbao, but the tide clearly isn't dead yet. They've not killed them off. But to be in that position, nobody would have expected it. I mean, again, as I said earlier in the week, United's Premier League form is so irrelevant where it comes to the Europa League. And it was a really fascinating dynamic going into the game, because yesterday I have not seen so many home shirts in the city on a match day. The Athletic Bilbao fans, the best comparison I can think of, and I can't say I've ever spent a day in the city ahead of a game, would be Newcastle, because it's a one-club city. But everyone was just absolutely living for this European semi-final. It was a public holiday. You had kids out in the street playing football, and maybe in the end the emotion got the better of them, because Athletic Bilbao, I mean, I thought it would be a step up for United from Real Sociedad and Lyon, and it was more like a Premier League game than a Europa League game at the start. United were overwhelmed. Athletic should have scored at least once. They had two great opportunities. I think there was a big element of luck with Victor Lindelof clearing off the line, having essentially unwittingly almost got an assist, but with a poor clearance. Iñaki Williams' chance, that would possibly haunt him forever, unfortunately, because, let's face it, Athletic Bilbao aren't going to be hosting another Europa League final, or their stadium isn't going to be hosting another European final anytime soon. And once United got that breakthrough, they kept their heads. Casemiro used his head. Athletic Bilbao lost their heads. I thought it was a blatant tug on Højlund, and going off how deliberate it was and the position he was in, it was the correct decision to give a red card. And whilst all that pandemonium was going on, you just saw Bruno Fernandes clutching the ball, pacing around the penalty area very, very calmly, and you didn't doubt that he was going to stick the ball away. And I suppose with that first half, although you had the best players on the night clearly were Casemiro, Fernandes, and Harry Maguire, but in a way, Ugarte kind of encapsulated how that half seesawed, because he was really poor at the start, to the point where Casemiro was effectively doing a two-man job where Ugarte was not at it. Yet he came up with 2 very dexterous assists for the first goal and the third goal. And if United to have been 3-0 up at half-time, what would the odds have been on that? pre-match. It must have been thousands, like maybe a Leicester City 5,000-1 shot to win the Premier League. It was just, you work it out. You look at Athletic Bilbao, best defenders in the league, in La Liga. United, goal shy all season in the Premier League. But as I've said, they are a different beast. I mean, this team, they love the Europa League as much as Sevilla, I think. Maybe that's the chant that United fans should come up with. It's just like watching Seville rather than Brazil. 15 goals in 5 knockout ties is crazy. And I think for the last 15 Premier League goals United have scored, you have to go back 5 months to the Everton game. I think that is the time frame in which they've scored those 15 Premier League goals. That's how impotent they've been in the Premier League. But the Europa League, where their focus is reinforced, where they know the season is riding on it, and of course the quality is diluted and it's a little bit slower, but last night the pace was up and they still came through it. They rode their luck, of course, but when they got their chances, they were clinical. And amazingly, there were some people of United persuasion last night saying, it would have been good if we could have got a fourth. You think, Man United winning 3-0 at Athletic Bilbao, and they're still, thinking, if only Mazraoui hadn't hit the bar, or if Casemiro hadn't hit the post. So that's how great a night it was for them.
It certainly was. Samuel, you mentioned there about United fans singing about Brazil. I've seen images this morning of Harry Maguire's head on a Brazil shirt. His cross was that good for the opening goal. I don't think any of us thought he'd got that in his locker. A remarkable pre-assist, if you like, for Ugarte to flick it on to Casemiro. And Harry Maguire, the redemption story continues. Another really solid night for him at both ends of the pitch.
He spoke in the mix zone last night, and the quotes will already be on the site by the time this is aired. And I asked him, actually, I said, do you think this is your best season? I know you've had a few injuries, but you've had huge moments, and your form has been good. And he disagreed. He said he felt his first 2 seasons were his best ones. And I can understand the rationale in that United finished third in 2019-20 and then second the following season. But that second season was fake football because of COVID and the absence of supporters from matches. I actually feel, given how bad United have been this season, to play as well as he has and to come out this season with the credit that he will come out of it, I think that shows real mettle of the bloke. And also, look what's happened since those first 2 seasons. He had the captaincy taken off him. He saw a transfer to West Ham collapse. His recovery, Amorim said himself last night, he's an example. And he's not the only example in that team. Looking at some of the other senior players, when Casemiro's resurgence in the Europa League has been, I didn't see it coming, but injury to Samuel Luckhurst, it allowed him to come back in against Real Sociedad, and he's been excellent in all 5 of those knockout ties, and his influence on that team in Europe has been profound. But Maguire's where we were in the press box, in front of us were corporate and executive ticket holders from United. So Andy Cole was in there, Wes Brown was in there, some of the players' wives. I spotted Kobe Mainoo's agent and his father. Alejandro Garnacho's agent was in there as well. A couple of rows in front of us, there were 4 lads with Garnacho 17 on the back of their shirt. So you think, wonder whose family, whose United family they're from. So, but Harry Maguire's family, they were one of the last to arrive. But fortunately for them, there was no chance of them missing their son's piece of skill. And in a way, it was a bit of a shame that Ugarte was the one who got the assist in the end, because as Ange Postecoglou said, and he had a point when he said how worthless assists are, and I agree with him to an extent. I still think expected goals is the biggest nonsense in football, but assists can be grossly overstated. I hate this new jargon, this phrase, goal contributions. There was something said about, Erling Haaland's got this amount of goal contributions. Erling Haaland doesn't need that. He's a striker. But as obsessive as some people can be on stats, just appreciate the quality of the football. And Maguire is a good footballer. I know there have been times where he's had some times where he's not looked like a footballer for United, and that's when his confidence has been on the floor. But we all remember how well he did for England at the Euros. And look, if Pep Guardiola wants to sign you, whatever your skill set as a defender, technically you've got something about you. And Jose Mourinho wanted to sign Harry Maguire as well. They're the two greatest coaches this century. He's clearly a good footballer, and I'm really pleased for him on a personal level. I've said that before, and as I said the other week, in terms of the context of it, I've criticised him. I said he should have had the captaincy taken off him 3 years ago. There were times when he wasn't authentic enough with his post-match media duties, and clearly I don't think he was suited to that role. And when United were really, when they really hit the skids under Solskjaer and Rangnick, it put him in an invidious position, and he was just ill-suited to it. Now, and people at the club say it as well, he speaks differently, he acts differently. He's very comfortable speaking to us after games. He's done it a fair few times this season. He did it a fair few times last season. And also, there's a real drive for him because he's not started a final for Manchester United. He's been injured for 2 of them, the 21 Europa League final, last year's FA Cup final. He would certainly have started in both of them if he was fit. He only came on in the 88th minute in the League Cup final in 2023, which was essentially to help Bruno Fernandes lift the trophy that day. And the FA Cup final that year, he was an unused substitute. He was never going to start, and Victor Lindelof starts ahead of him. And even if Victor Lindelof was injured, Luke Shaw possibly would have started at centre-back ahead of him that day because his stock was that low. So there's a huge incentive for him to help United get to the final because he's not starting one for them, even though he's been at the club for four finals so far. And again, that would continue this feel-good story that is one of renaissance. And I know he was injured for the last England squad anyway, but he wasn't picked. Or there was an England squad early this season, I think, when he wasn't picked, even though he was fit at the time. I think it might have been under Lee Carsley, which I didn't understand anyway. But he is, at the moment, he's got whatever Thomas Tuchel's going to do, whether he's going to go to a back three at some point, or whether he sticks with 2 centre-backs. Harry Maguire has to be in it because he's one of England's best centre-backs at the moment.
Yeah, fully agree with that. And I think a lot of us said at the time of Ruben Amorim's appointment that a back three would suit Harry Maguire because of what he'd done in that system for England, particularly at Euro 2020. But as you mentioned, Samuel, and I agree with you, I think taking the armband off him was the right call. That was passed to Bruno Fernandes. And after scoring a hat-trick against Sociedad, sparking the extra time comeback against Lyon, another 2 goals for him last night. He's just getting better and better. He's aging like a fine wine, I think, now. It's 19 goals this season, the joint top leading scorer in the Europa League. Where would they be without him? He was excellent again last night, I thought.
Has he got 20 goals this season now, is it?
19, I think it is.
Is it 19? I
19.
20, so, well...
I think it's 19.
You're in trouble if you're wrong, George, but I'm gonna go off you. I'd put it down as his first 20 goal haul, but I think he's probably safe in terms of hitting that mark anyway. And similarly to Maguire, this has possibly been his. In fact, I'd hesitate to say it's been his best season because the first few months he was really poor. Now it's easily forgotten, but his output this calendar year in particular in this team is nothing short of remarkable, because United are, domestically at least, they are a poor side. You only have to look at the league table, and this weekend they could be certain of the bottom half finish. We know that's going to happen, but it could be confirmed with 3 games left to play. But with Fernandes, he'll have known for months that he's certain to keep that Busby statue in his lounge on the mantelpiece. But he's a man who's driven by club honours, not individual honours, even though he is a very individualistic player in a way because of just the numbers he's recorded. And I think that season when they got to the Europa League final, he scored 28 goals, and he probably broke double figures for assists, but his performance level at times was quite erratic. I think his performance level, certainly this calendar year, has been terrific. And he's done it from midfield. You know he's going to do it as the playmaker. And as I've said a number of times, you could put him in goal and he would still probably be United's most creative player because his impact on the team is that profound. And it's difficult. I remember when he first came in, one of the fanzine editors, Barney at Red News, mentioned him, compared him to Cantona, which is, I think, is blasphemous. I think the more relevant comparison, given certainly the league position, it's more the Brian Robson figure, in that he is immense in a team that has effectively underachieved. United aspired to be challenging for the Premier League title, and they've not done that since they last won the Premier League title. But his efforts, his pain threshold is nowhere near as high as Brian Robson's. I think it's safe to say that. But his indefatigability, his impact, his habit to always be there when he's needed there have been few United players I've seen who can do that over such a long sustained period. And the great Manchester United teams, the benefit the great players had was that they were surrounded by other great players. So you could always lean on someone. With United, they are always leaning on Fernandes, or have mostly this season. There's been a sense that they're always looking to him. After Ahmad got injured, they were one-man band in attack. Up until then, it felt like Ahmad was the one-man band. And then Fernandes has taken that on. And those two have been their best players this season because of the huge influence they've wielded in the final third. And I go back to, with Fernandes, in terms of the poor start he made for the season, the making of him this season was the red card against Wolves on Boxing Day, because it was a stupid red card. It cost the team. They lost again. I think that was their third defeat in a row. Meant he'd be suspended against Newcastle at home a few days later. They were thrashed 2-0 in that, effectively. Certainly in the first 30 minutes. And when he was sent off against Wolves and he walked off, he was blanked by Ruben Amorim, as he should have been, as any manager should do when a player gets sent off like that. His next game at Anfield, he was terrific. And that has been the turning point for him this season. Turn of the year, he's turned the page and he's been United's best player. He's been so good this season that he would probably merit inclusion in the PFA Premier League Team of the Year. I'm not sure if he will get in, but in terms of his overall contributions, and I know a lot of his goals have come in the Europa League and those things get judged, I think, maybe primarily on domestic form. He is one of the best players in England still. And when he got that contract last summer, it's clear why he got that contract, because he was the player of the year again. He deserved remuneration. He deserved to be on a level similar to Marcus Rashford or Casemiro. But then he succumbs to what a lot of United players succumb to after signing a new contract, that their form falls off the edge of the cliff. And I know the red card was overturned against Tottenham, but just the manner in which he got sent off with such a deliberate, needless and borderline nasty foul on James Maddison, that was unbecoming behaviour. And he's not a perfect captain. We know that. There are times when he can drive you up the wall, but I think he's even reined that in recently. And there's no two ways about it. He is worthy of the captaincy at Manchester United. He was a very good captain there at Ten Hag's first full season. He was a good captain last season. He's still a good captain. Looking at the probability of Mateus Cunha coming in, there are pros and cons, of course, and people talk about his temperament, his spikiness. But United need more edge in that team. They need players who have got a bit of attitude, but they rein it in, they balance it. They balance it in the right way. And certainly it feels like since January, Fernandes has done that. He got sent off 3 times in the first 3 months, in 3 months, I think, against Porto, Spurs and Wolves. So he's clearly, consciously made a change regarding his discipline. It feels like, although he always gets stick off opposition fans, it's a compliment, because he's the biggest threat in the Manchester United team. He's the driving force in that side. So whatever happens between now and the end of his United career, he will be remembered very, very fondly, and it's another opportunity for him to win a trophy as well as captain of the club. He captained them in the previous two finals, the finals that they won under Ten Hag. So it's another big incentive for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 13 goals this calendar year for him now. So it does highlight what you were saying, Samuel, about how that Wolves red card does seem to have been a turning point for him. 13 goals since he scored against Arsenal in the FA Cup. Obviously, Fernandes did operate in one of the two 10 positions again last night, which meant Ugarte, as we both predicted on Monday, came back into the team alongside Casemiro. Ugarte had a really iffy start, as we've already touched upon, but grew into the game. A couple of assists, a lovely assist for the second goal, it must be said. But Casemiro, you've touched on it already, Samuel, but like Maguire, his redemption story in the Europa League in particular has been quite remarkable. And there'll probably be one or two people question now whether United should cash in on him this summer. It's going to be a difficult one, but I still think United have got to look long term rather than his last few performances with him.
Well, if he does go, or if he was to possibly leave, there's probably a market for him now. The stumbling block is always going to be his salary, which is United's fault because they gave him more than £300,000 a week, and there are very few clubs who will be paying that. I think the fee that he'd be available for at 15 million going off the CSR, unless there's a bonus that kicks in and triggers that other £10 million payment, I think some clubs will be okay to receptive to paying that. But the way it's going, I think it's looking like he's destined, just because of the circumstances there, that he will see out his contract United for a fourth year. And that isn't a problem unless they're not in the Champions League next season, because I know I'm starting out with somewhat negativity on him, but if they've not gone to European football next season, I do think he is pretty much redundant, because he can't. His Premier League form, it's not been good. And there have been some games recently where he's been inoffensive. But as I said, against Manchester City, a really tepid match, which had 4 30-somethings in the City midfield. It wasn't a problem for him to keep up. Last night, what was particularly striking about his performance was that he was good when United were not good, when they were struggling, and he was doing a two-man job where Ugarte was just not at it. He was really doing a pretty commendable shift there and holding the fort and trying to keep United organised. One of the big pluses for United under Amorim is that those days of last season where chaos ensued are over. I mean, they squandered 2-goal leads and a 3-goal lead against Championship Commentary last season. The games against Copenhagen and Galatasaray absolutely did it for them in the Champions League. That's why they went out in the group stage, where they had a 2-0 lead against Copenhagen. They were 2-0 up and 3-1 up in Istanbul as well. Last night, you did not have the sense, and I know Athletic Bilbao were down to 10 men, so that makes a huge difference, but it never felt like that result was going to be in jeopardy for United. It was always, the second half, it was always a case of how many will they win it by, and it was a very professional job they did after half-time. There was no need to go hell for leather. They had some reasonable chances, but they didn't need to force the issue. And that benefits Casemiro. I think the back three benefits him as well, because he's not as isolated at times, he's not as detached. The setup of that system was absolutely perfect for them to protect a 3-goal lead in the circumstances. And okay, he's in the midfield too still, which in essence may not seem as different as playing in 4-2-3-1, but there have been clear adjustments there in that he's been partnered with Ugarte primarily. With Mainu, you don't know whether he's going to make that full-time transition to one of the two playmakers, to a playmaker role under Amorim, and his future is still a little bit up in the air as well. And long-term, United are going to need to freshen up midfield because Christian Eriksen will be released in the summer. Mainu can play there. He can play further forward. Toby Collier has had quite a few injury issues this season and hasn't played probably as much as he should have done. Casemiro is 33. He'll be 34 in February next year. So you can't expect him to sustain this form, I think, next season. Particularly if United are in the Champions League, it'll be a level up in quality as well. But it is testament to his character that he could have just seen out his contract, put his feet up, but he's not built that way, and he's playing in a competition that is beneath him effectively, given what he achieved with Real Madrid. But the drive to succeed in it, you've seen how much it means to him. I think at Real Madrid, where they were so accustomed to success, sometimes the joy of it can be lost on you. And you've seen with Casemiro some of the goals he celebrated with United and the trophies he's won, how much it means to him, because that success it doesn't come to United as easily as it does to Real Madrid. And he's fully embraced that. And I suppose until the Real Sociedad first leg, which Ugarte was injured for, having got injured against Fulham a few days earlier, that's been the turning point for Casemiro, because he had to come in the team as a defensive midfielder that night. He played well. He was even better in the second leg. And at that point, Amorim clearly decided, right, he's absolutely right for us in European competition. And whether Casemiro goes in the summer or next year, he will always be remembered for what he did against Lyon. And he's done a fair bit for United already. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that people will look at his time at United and conclude fairly that he was a successful signing, which I don't think anybody would have predicted a month ago. But winning a League Cup, winning an FA Cup, if they were to win the Europa League as well, and salvage the season. And I know the players have come out and said, and Amorim said, "Oh no, it won't save our season." I mean, it will. If they win the Europa League and qualify for the Champions League, you have saved the season. It's not been a success because look at the league form, but they will have. I disagree with them on that. They will have saved it. And you can be sure that if they do win the Europa League, Casemiro will have had an absolutely huge role to play, because if he is fit, he starts in the final. Even against Tottenham, who he didn't start against back in October because he was, or September, I think it was late September, because he was just out of the picture, or Ten Hag was phasing him out of the picture at that point. And he struggled against Spurs in February as well, which at the time was a rare start, and people think, oh God, we're going to have to start Casemiro today. He's changed a lot of perceptions since then. But if say they do come up against Spurs in the final, that will be an interesting one, because that's not a Europa League final. It's more of a Premier League final for the obvious reason.
Yeah, and Samuel, as well as Casemiro enjoying a really solid night last night, I thought Nusa Mazraoui was very, very good on the right-hand side for United. He pocketed Nico Williams, apart from the first sort of 5 or 6 minutes where Williams, I think you put a blog post in our blog about his dancing feet causing problems early on. But aside from that, he was very, very quiet. Mazraoui kept him at arm's length, and he managed to get forward a lot more than we anticipated. Of course, the red card helped, but I thought he was excellent last night.
He's probably been their best signing of the summer, and for the money they paid for him, that has worked out really well. He's played in every Premier League game. That run's going to stop this weekend, because Amorim has said he won't play, and that is completely logical and sensible. He should make wholesale changes for that match. And Mazraoui was training separately from the squad at Carrington on Wednesday as his load is being managed. So he should be in Manchester. He shouldn't even be in London on Sunday. But I think as a winger, that was possibly his best performance, given what was at stake, given the opposition. I mean, Nico Williams is not daft. He saw Victor Lindelof and thought, can you please come over a little bit more to my side so I can just run at you? And he was, I think Mazraoui got wise to it in that he started to consciously tuck in a little bit more, or backtrack somewhat. But of course, when they had the man advantage, that was license for him to get forward a little bit more. He was very unlucky not to score his first goal for the club. But he's been a really, really good recruit in terms of the money they paid. And I know West Ham were looking at it in the summer, and a sceptic would have thought, why United going for someone that West Ham are in for? And if Bayern Munich want to sell someone, should you really, really be after them? But where he came in seemingly as a squad player, I think you make an allowance for that. If you're just taking Bayern Munich's Deadwood and they're going straight into the Manchester United team, I think that's a problem. And although De Ligt was getting better before his injury, I'd maintain he's a player that they should not have signed. But Mazraoui came in essentially as a squad player. And I remember we said before the season restarted after the March internationals that he won't be in any of our best United 11s. But I said that he will be playing in the majority of games in the run-in just because of the circumstances and the injury situations. And it will be interesting to see what happens with, assuming United get to the final, but if Diogo Dalot is fit, and with Matthias de Ligt fit now as well, could you really countenance Mazraoui not starting in the Europa League final? Should you even entertain it? I mean, I don't think it will get to that. I suspect Dalot will not recover in time, and in that case, it's Mazraoui on the right and Dorgo on the left. But even if Dalot and De Ligt are available, Mazraoui has to start because he's deserved it. I think after Ahmad and Fernandes, he's maybe Maguire as well. But Mazraoui has certainly been in the top 3 or top 4 performers for United this season. And again, if you're doing that in a team this poor, you've got something about you. And technically, he's very proficient. I don't think he's particularly attack-minded fullback, and he never is going to be. But he's played at right back, right wing, left wing, right centre back, left centre back, and as a number 10 this season, most bizarrely. But he's not really had. It's difficult to recall one game where he's been atrocious, and his performance level has been. It's the solid consistency you want from a fullback, or in his case, where he was playing last night, a winger.
Yeah, definitely. I thought obviously the position he took up to send in the low cross that led to the penalty prior to the red card, it was a hallmark of what Amorim wants from his wing backs. He got into a good position and sent in the cross that obviously Højlund wasn't able to get to, but the penalty was awarded. But Samuel, just to wrap up this section before we move on to Sundays, have a quick look at that. United 3-0 up, home advantage in the second leg in a European competition. No team has ever overturned a 3-goal deficit when they're away from home in the second leg. We saw against Lyon, anything is possible, anything can happen, but you've got to back United in this position to get the job done, haven't you?
Absolutely. It's a glorious position for them to be in, and at the risk of tempting fate, I don't think they are the team of last season, which is a strange thing to say because domestically, at least, they are worse. They're quite a few places worse off than the 8th they ended up in under Erik ten Hag, but they don't collapse. They've obviously lost a lot of games, but it doesn't feel like they've. As I've said quite a few times, teams have beaten United without playing well, which is a worry. But United haven't been properly battered this season. The Newcastle game you can dismiss because the white flag was waved at 2-1 that day when Josh Resurgence got injured and Amorim started to make changes to look ahead to the second leg against Lyon. That's the only game they've conceded 4 goals in this season. They've had some bad defeats on the way. They have lost 3-0 at home, probably more times than people think. It's happened 3 times. So I'm sure unless Valverde will look at that and think, don't be too crestfallen because Liverpool have done it, Tottenham have done it. Look how bad a team Tottenham are. And Bournemouth have done it. The glaring, what people will notice there is that 2 of those defeats came under Erik ten Hag. The Bournemouth one was a real bad one, a strange one as well, because United had a terrific result at City the previous week. They came out of the League Cup defeat to Tottenham with quite a lot of credit in the bank a few days earlier. And then all of a sudden we've got Tyrone Marshall on the left wing and they're getting trounced 3-0 at home by Bournemouth, and it's a regression to 12 months previously when they were also battered 3-0 at home by Bournemouth under Erik ten Hag. But I don't really see it happening. I wouldn't be surprised if Athletic Bilbao score. They showed what a threat they can be, that they are. They should have got a goal during those the opening 20 or 30 minutes. Amorim said on Wednesday that United really had to get through those first 30 minutes, and they did. They barely scraped through it, and as soon as that 30-minute mark was hit, of course, they got the goal. So it almost looks like the game plan panned out exactly as they wanted to, but they did have to ride their luck a little bit in the first 30 minutes. But having home advantage is huge. I think that's what did it for United against Sevilla a couple of years ago. The fact that Sevilla were playing the second leg at home, that just overwhelmed United. It felt that night, even though it was 2-2 going into it on aggregate, it felt like Sevilla had won that tie before kickoff. Just how partisan their supporters were, and it was fervent last night. But I maintain, in terms of Spanish stadiums I've been to, Sevilla is still the absolute top, and that's probably because that club love the Europa League more than any other, as we've discussed before. But where United have the home advantage, that also swings it. So they don't collapse like they used to last season. They're a much more tighter unit. They'll be in the right system to protect that lead. As you said, there've been so many European comebacks in recent years that it wouldn't be a shock. But I do think United have the organisation and the mentality to get through the night relatively calmly.
You'd certainly like to think so, but as I say, after what happened against Lyon, I'm dismissing nothing at this stage. Anything is possible. But Samuel, moving forward quickly to Sunday, it feels quite an insignificant game, really. A bit similarly to Bournemouth last weekend. It's whatever the result, it's not going to mean or change anything in United's domestic season. All of the focus is going to be on the team. Would you possibly look at making 11 changes? Would you rotate the lot? You've already said Nusa Mazraoui is not going to play. Chido probably feels like a perfect opportunity for him to get his first start for the club. Would you make changes en masse?
Yeah, at minimum 10. The goalkeeping rotation, I'm not necessarily a fan of, although you could probably make an allowance for it on this occasion, given that Onana's, fortunately for him, he's had a much needed quiet few weeks, and Bindier didn't cover himself in glory against Newcastle, but Mazraoui won't play. I doubt whether Dorgu would play, because he was training separately on Wednesday as his load was being managed. I certainly don't think he should start. So, of course, if with those two possibly not playing, it does raise the possibility of Jayden Camerson making his debut, because United won't have a senior right back, right winger at Brentford. I don't think it will be a bunch of kids, because you've got Dillitt, Johnny Evans, Luke Shaw, who need minutes or who could do with minutes. Harry Maguire seems like a logical pick on the left wing. Midfield, it's quite tricky because they don't have many ideal options there. So it may have to be Christian Eriksen and Kobbie Mainoo out of necessity. But with Chido, I certainly would imagine this is a good opportunity for him to have a full debut, where Højlund put in a very, very good shift last night. Amorim said it was his best game under him, and I can see where he's coming from. I'd still maintain it was probably the Real Sociedad home leg, but given that they were up against a better side last night in Athletic Bilbao, and the contribution Højlund made in terms of his hold-up play and that run for the game-changing moment of the red card and the penalty, I can fully understand why Amorim said that. And although Højlund's got 2 goals in 30 games, his confidence is up at the moment. So in a way, he may actually, if you're Højlund, he possibly wants to play at the weekend and keep that match rhythm going. But he should be wrapped up in cotton wool for the second leg against Athletic Bilbao. So as I said, Jayden Camerson travelled with the squad to Bilbao. United stayed overnight, trained in Spain today on Friday. It's an opportunity for him, certainly, to make his debut on Sunday, and I'd see logic in it. I mean, it's not necessarily ideal having 2 wingers as two really callow 18-year-olds, but Harry Maguire has done very well in his Premier League starts. Camerson, I really like the look of during the Youth Cup run. When I went to Leeds to watch him against Chelsea, he was the standout player aside from Chido, who got a hat-trick. So he's edging closer to getting that debut. He made the matchday squad for the first time last month. He's a very attack-minded right back, so I think he'd be well suited to that role. And as you said, it's a free hit. The result doesn't matter. I know that United or Amorim has to stress, you get £3 million every improved finish in the Premier League, and you want to sustain some momentum. And it would have done no harm whatsoever with that late equaliser against Bournemouth last week. This weekend, United could be confirmed as finishing in the bottom half of the table. They don't want to have that against them, but we all know it's coming. They've lost 15 games. If they lose 16, it's the most since 1989-90. But all of this, it's going to happen at some stage. I think we all know, in terms of record number of defeats, blah blah blah, finishing in the bottom half of the table. But you can. It feels permissible just because they're on the cusp of reaching the Europa League final, and we have known for 4 months that this season was going to be Europa League or bust.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously another big plus of last night was Ahmad getting some minutes back from injury after a few months out. Obviously, we're not privy to the exact state of his fitness and things like that, but would you possibly give him a start on Sunday, Samuel, if fitness allows him to do so in one of the two number 10 positions, perhaps alongside Mason Mount and possibly Chido-Obi?
He looked pretty sharp when he came on as well last night. He hit the ground running. I think people can be certainly encouraged by the way he reintroduced himself to his teammates and United supporters. So yeah, I mean they'll know better than we do. It may be a little bit too early. Brentford, and I don't think Brentford will be obliging opponents. They've given United some of their toughest games in recent years. United have never had it easy down at Brentford, whether they've won, lost or drawn. I mean, it's been some very, very strangely, the performance level has been consistent, but they've been consistently atrocious down at Brentford, apart from the second half there in Brentford's first season in the Premier League. I mean, United somehow got in at 0-0 and then they scored 3 goals quite early. It felt early in the second half and ended up winning 3-1, but the 4-0 debacle was, I maintain that is the generation and the nadir for United performances. And last season, although they drew, their performance was actually worse than when they got hammered 4-0. Thomas Frank said afterwards that Brentford were better in that game than when they hammered United 4-0 in what was Ten Hag's second game in charge. So there's not as much riding on it as those previous games, which I think United would be grateful for, because as I said, they've had some real goings over down at Brentford in the Premier League. But Brentford, strangely for them, as well as they've done against United in terms of their performances, and I include Old Trafford games as well, where they've won the luck, then into the 90th minute, somehow lose 2-1 because of Scott McTominay. This season, they were 1-0 up at half time, and they seemed well poised to see that out, but they crumbled quite quickly and unexpectedly in the second half. They're in this strange situation, Brentford, where it feels like they've reached their absolute peak under Thomas Frank, and I think that's why he's so media friendly, because as committed as he is to the club, he's also going to be thinking, am I going to get a better club than this? He probably deserves a better club, but Munja and club, everyone there is just suited to each other, and as long as he is there, they'll probably stay in the Premier League. But you get the sense that he's ready for that major challenge.
Yeah, and a good win for them last night, of course, beating Nottingham Forest, taking them to win within 3 points of 8 spots. So it's going to be a tough ask for United. The team news will probably be the most interesting element of the afternoon on Sunday. But that does mark the end of this episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, make sure to leave a like and maybe a comment as well. We'll be back again next week to reflect on the past week's action and hopefully talk about United reaching the Europa League final. Make sure you subscribe when that drops. Enjoy the bank holiday weekend, and we'll catch you again soon.